Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are around the world. We will get started in roughly 2 minutes at 1:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Please be patient with us as we prepare for our broadcast, and we thank you for joining us today. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We will get started in 60 seconds at 1:01 p.m. Eastern Time to allow our audience into the Zoom platform. Please be patient with us as we prepare for our broadcast. Thank you. All right, I have 1:01 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for our LPF webinar titled Elevate Your Retail Game, Enabling Intelligent Stores at Scale for Smarter Operations, Empowered Staff, and Maximize Profitability, sponsored by Pitaya by Centific. We would like to thank Pitaya by Centific for being a valued LPF partner and for sponsoring today's session. Pitaya is the innovative software as a service platform that utilizes data-driven AI, including computer vision technology, large language models, deep learning, and neural networks to make your existing cameras smarter, automate manual monitoring and data collection, deliver actionable insights, cut costs, grow revenue, and achieve unprecedented retail efficiency and success. My name is Matt Schreiner, and I'm the Senior Director of Operations for the Loss Prevention Foundation, and I will be your host today. Before we introduce our speakers, we do want to cover a couple logistics items. First and foremost, this session is being recorded. Everyone is muted. Audio is available through the webinar portal, as well as the dial-in number provided when you registered. And we do ask that you ask any questions throughout the presentation into the Q&A box, and we will attempt to get to as many of those questions at the end of the broadcast as possible to ensure we're able to get through the material that has been prepared for you today. Now let's meet our distinguished speakers. First up, we have Jumbi Edulbehram, Global Business Development, Smart Cities, and Space with Nvidia. Good afternoon, Jumbi. Next up, we have Praveen Gururaja, Director Commercial Industries with Microsoft. Good afternoon, Praveen.
Happy to be here.
And last up, we have Wayne Akoka, Head of Retail CPG with Pitaya by Centific. Good afternoon, Wayne.
Good afternoon. How's it going?
Doing very well. Excited for this webinar. Excited to hear from all of you. Before we get into more of the questions for you all, we do want to poll the audience. So we'll take roughly 30 seconds to gain some insights from the audience. What is the biggest challenge you face in your role as a loss prevention professional today? And for my panelists, do any of you have any inclination what you believe the top response is going to be from the audience?
I think the top response is going to be the one that's, in my opinion, the toughest to address, which is ORC.
Interesting. Wayne, how about you?
ORC, I think, is a good answer. I'm going to think employee theft.
Okay. All right, we'll give it just a couple more seconds. And let's share these results with everyone. So the number one response is ORC with 38%, followed closely by lack of resources at 26 and inadequate technology, which are definitely interrelated to one another for sure. So thank you, audience, for your feedback. So let's get into our discussion. So from the perspective of retail, we know that retail is facing some unprecedented challenges in today's environment. Can each of you elaborate on what the top 2 or 3 challenges you're hearing from your retail clients that they're facing today? And for this question, I do want to start with Praveen. Praveen, what is your perspective on this dialogue?
Yeah, as we saw from the poll, right? So all of them were kind of interrelated. So most of the foundational challenges we still hear from the retailers is around employee retention and optimization. Like coming out of the post-pandemic, given the growing inflation and the economic condition, we are seeing a high attrition rate. So it's really hard to retain employees and then even hire them back into the right roles. So a lot of discussions that we are having with customers are around how do you reduce manual labor, how to bring in the right technology to enable productivity and collaboration, how to free up time and improve store operations so that they can focus on customer service and improving sales within the stores. So these are really top of the mind. And another is, as the omni-channel scenario and the unified commerce is growing, a lot of buy online, pick up at store, or buy online, return at store has kind of compounded the loss prevention scenarios where defected products, theft, and shrinkage are happening around returns, loyalty. So it is becoming a very challenging environment at the store to drive focus and productivity end to end.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot of head nodding going on with Wayne and Jumbi. So it seems like you have both experienced very similar feedback from your retail clients and what they're facing. Can you elaborate a little bit on your challenges that you're hearing from your retail clients?
Sure, maybe I'll go first. Actually, very, very close to what Praveen was just saying. I think retailers are trying to figure out sort of the new normal, right? Post-COVID, they need to get information from their stores with regards to not just loss prevention, but planogram optimization, customer behavior, with the overall experience. I mean, the overall goal really being to make the shopper experience as efficient and as seamless as possible to make sure people keep coming back to brick and mortar stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't see that ever changing. At least in the current perspective, I don't see people not wanting to shop, at least in some percentage of their daily living. Wayne, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo what my partner said. Praveen makes a very good point about employee churn that, from just statistics we know is around 75%. So it's basically every year and a half, you have a whole new set of in-store store associates, right? The boots on the ground. And compounded to that is what Jumbi mentioned is the experience is also very important. But when you make it come together and we look at, the different retailers we talk to and we work with, a lot of the issues stem from theft for sure, and some of the insecurities that come with it. And so a lot of stuff that you see right now, if you go to a Walgreens or a CVS, you can't even choose shampoo anymore without assistance. And I personally like to smell the shampoo I buy before getting it, but it's hurting the customer experience at the end of the day. And this is due to aisle shrink for sure. And we know that those type of theft, much more outside represents around 35% of overall shrink, I would say. But other things that are more curious and that we're seeing more and more as retailers are trying to protect their bottom line is also register and self-checkout shrink. So you can see, it happens to have a misscan, to not scan the product, but sometimes it's done intentionally or intentionally they do barcode swaps. So buy a bottle of of wine, for example, swap it for a potato, so it's a little bit cheaper to buy. And also, and to that extent, when we look to normal register lanes with store employees, there's an increase in internal theft, right? Sweethearting, void of certain transaction, pocketing cash, and those are use cases that are very top of mind because they're let's say you can more easily identify those things and take corrective action that really drive impact. Whereas shrink in the aisle is more of a sporadic in frequency.
No, I couldn't agree more. And the whole sweethearting thing is one of those challenges that retail has really been trying to identify what can we use to prevent these large dollar amount incidents from happening. Because typically when an employee is passing off or sweethearting to another person, it's not going to be a candy bar. It's going to be, they might pay for a soda, but they might end up leaving with a cartload of groceries or a cartload of electronics or a cartload of other high theft or highly desirable items that they can turn around and turn for cash or other compensation later on. So interesting to hear all the perspectives on what your clients are facing. Just from my past experience in retail loss prevention, I would echo and agree with you on many of those aspects that are currently challenges in today's environment. So we want to have another poll. So which aspect of retail operations poses the greatest challenge for your organization? Supply chain management and inventory optimization, customer experience, competitive pricing and promotions, planogram compliance and product assortment, shrink and workplace safety, workforce management and training, data privacy, security, or other. And if you have an other, feel free to put that in the chat to the host and the panelists. We would love to see what you are currently experiencing as well. So we'll take another 30 seconds. And any perspective from our panelists today on what you forecast or believe is going to be the top response from the audience.
I'm going to put my money on shrink and workplace safety.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, definitely that would be on the top. Competitive pricing and promotions and planogram compliance. I think those two are top of the minds too.
All right.
Yeah, I'll second that, guys, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for our audience responding so quickly. So we do have some interesting statistics. So shrink and workplace safety is our #1 response with 33% of the audience, followed by workforce management and training. And I do think that's because of the churn that we're seeing within the industry and the employee retention being so high. Having the ability to train employees or do real-time training while they're on the job, actually executing tasks, is becoming more and more prevalent, more and more necessary because we need the people out on the sales floor. And third place was supply chain management, inventory optimization. I feel like what we've seen in lieu of COVID and the supply chain challenges that our world experienced, that is something that every retailer is trying to minimize that disruption to ensure that business continues to operate at a high efficiency and a high rate of return on their investments with their products and what they're supplying to their customers. So excellent feedback from the audience. Thank you all so much. So next discussion question, with the many challenges we just heard of, what are the roadblocks retailers are currently running into while they're attempting to solve those challenges with advancements in technology? And this time, I do want to start with Wayne at Centific. So Wayne, what's your perspective? What roadblocks are retailers experiencing today?
I think there's 3 of them. The first one we have is often, and to be very candid, often discussions about yes, we've run many POCs, we run many pilots, but we always struggle to scale, right? I have 100 stores, I have 1,000 stores. How do I get there? What can I do to solve it? Because I've tried it, I've tried many methods, but what's your way of looking at the scaling? And I think that the objective should be in general, and that's what we do with Pitaya, is it's not proving that the technology works, it's proving that it's scalable. So when we go at a pilot, we usually try to prove the scalability, and the technology will solve itself, right? The second point I think is massive CapEx investments, right? Oftentimes technologists in general would say, hey, please adapt to my technology, change camera angles, invest in cameras, invest in X, Y, and Z infrastructure. But without a tangible ROI, or calculation or business plan or ROI realization, it is very, very hard to justify. And this comes to a lot of roadblocks internally to say, hey, if I'm going to invest 5 million, how much am I going to save? Do we even know what current state is? And those are things we try to address as well. The final thing I would just say is for bigger companies like your top 20, obviously they have a lot of IT resources. They're technology companies by themselves and very good at it. But for a lot of other retailers and customers, they don't necessarily have that many people to support any IT initiatives. What their focus is, their core focus is the customer, it's the experience, it's their employees. And this is where we have to make, best in class would be an experience that's pretty seamless, that's pretty autonomous, and that doesn't necessarily drag the entire organization into some more IT focus endeavors.
And looks like your peers here are also agreeing with you, Wayne, on what's resonating with their clients. So Jumbi, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think the core issue in my mind behind exactly what Wayne said, and what Wayne said, he just nailed it. Those are the three huge blockers. But I think the core issue is that loss prevention continues to be seen as a cost center, right? They're just not seen as an exciting investment to grow the business. So it's difficult to implement long-term strategies in terms of IT, in terms of rollouts, etc. But what people have to realize is that the same infrastructure that you use for loss prevention can also be used for optimizing store operations, enhancing customer service, right? Which does have very, very clear ROIs. So investment in smart store technology is really, really well worth it, right? Just think about, to Wayne's point, rolling out a new POS system, happens very quickly across the whole chain. But rolling out a new loss prevention system, not so much. That thinking has just got to change.
I couldn't agree more on that. Every business unit needs to have a seat at that strategy and that discussion to make sure that we are optimizing every solution to optimize the business as a whole, not just looking at things in isolation, which so often is the case when we're talking about solutions and things in the market sector.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing I would add is I think Wayne and Jumbi have covered most of the challenges that we are seeing with the adoption of the technology. One other angle is like having a holistic view when it comes to loss prevention, right? Because it's about online transactions, cybersecurity, making sure that it can be return fraud, it can be loyalty and gift cards. So having a more holistic view on what are the steps that need to be taken to manage fraud at every touch point along the customer journey is important, and it needs to be a top-down initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. All of your comments are resonating in my head, and I just want to scream because these are the challenges that I know retailers continue to face, and so your insights are invaluable to our sector and our profession. So what would you all say are the latest advancements in computer vision, edge computing, cloud health that are unlocking the scalability for these retailers and kind of parking some of those roadblocks that have traditionally prevented wide scale adoption in these platforms? And today on this one, Jumbi, let's have you start us off.
Sure. So, from where we sit as a sort of core technology provider, we see a ton of great applications that are out there. But I think the new advancement right now is that a lot of these great applications run on platforms seamlessly from the edge to the server to the cloud, which offers retailers the maximum flexibility in deployment. because deployment strategies can change if your IT department decides to do something different, or the different applications have different needs. But today, a core set of really interesting applications are pretty much deployable anywhere from the edge to the cloud. And right now, retailers can invest in a common infrastructure that runs a whole host of applications, kind of like Pitaya, but other applications maybe for other store functions, pretty much in the same infrastructure. So I think that's what's really changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Praveen or Wayne?
Yeah, I think the advancement in technology and the accuracy at which, right? For example, if we take at cognitive services with camera vision, right? The accuracy at which it can identify images like from sweethearting to checkout theft prevention, like it's amazing. Where we need to start looking at is how do you integrate that into the flow of work, right? So how do you manage that into the people process and even the liability, because there is a big aspect of liability when it comes to loss prevention and what actions that you take. So working through like having the human-centric approach on like integrating technology into the processes, like I think it's key. And two is when it comes to loss prevention, we need to look at how you can avoid loss prevention. But if it happens, how can you use maybe predictive and generative AI to track the selling of those products in black market or online marketplaces, right? So there is great capabilities that are available today for web crawling and data crawling capabilities to identify patterns, and then partnering with the other retailers and law enforcement agencies to make sure that there are right processes in place.
Absolutely. And I do think you highlight a specific piece of technology a lot of retailers aren't leveraging nearly to the capability that's out there with web crawling and looking for those opportunities to identify where their product's going and where it's being fenced to really address the big fish that are causing the most harm to our retail environment. Because they are absorbing and selling those things cheaper than the manufacturers themselves can actually produce the product. Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, with Pitaya and Centific, right, we're very, very lucky to be able to work with companies so advanced as Microsoft and Nvidia. And those guys do a terrific job at bringing, the latest advancement and make them as usable as possible. And for us as technologists, we have so many more tools, and to their point, much more precise as well. And minimizing false positive, I'm sure everybody has a self-checkout experience around that is the key to a seamless customer experience. But when we take all those technologies together, what they enable us for our customers to do, especially with Pitaya, is to lower the barrier to entry, right? Connecting with your existing infrastructure, right? And being less reliant on point solutions for different use cases, being able to have a holistic platform to address multiple things at the same time will really help, I think later on we'll show, through change management, but also the management of your resources. How do I get better and get more ROI out of that single holistic investment versus multiple? The second point is the acceleration of ROI. Right? Before we know if we're trying to use any type of AI, and in this specific case, the video streams from the cameras, right? It would take, I would say in years, how long it would take to get certain results. But now you're able to have a faster time to realization of that ROI because you have good models that you can start with and then fine tune over time. And you lower the cost by bringing computing as close as possible to the edge. Naturally, with Nvidia, you're able to have, processing on the edge, but everything that needs even more or that needs more inference or aggregation, et cetera, we also use Microsoft as well in this kind of hybrid approach. And the final thing, and there's a lot of discussions around generative AI, is how accessible technology becomes. Like, I don't need to be technology savvy as a store operator or a store associate or even headquarters. I can just ask anything using large language model type of applications and just ask, what can I do? What is happening now? What can I do? What do you suggest? And really, we're at a great time for loss prevention. I say I'm very, very hopeful when I look at all those technologies. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Praveen.
One other technology, I think, as it gets cheaper, right, like RFID or disposable GPS tracking, it will become easier for a lot of retailers to embed them into their product by collaborating with suppliers, so that one, you can identify stolen products, and two, like apprehend like the responsible. So that's another like emerging area too, which is very interesting.
Absolutely. So one quick question. How well do you feel like the retail sector understands how much has been unlocked as it pertains to these roadblocks with the advancements in this technology? Are you still experiencing the same reservations and the same challenges retailers are bringing to you? Or do you feel like they're starting to understand that these things are no longer really roadblocks, and you have scalable solutions holistically that can help them truly optimize their stores?
That's a good question. I'll get a stab at it. So I think for sure is we don't want to be able to use people to use technology for technology's sake, right? Because I read about hype for certain words and whatever. But I think retailers know that technology can help them. They know that there are certain applications to it, but it has to be very focused on the use case and the usability of it, and proving it out. They understand the value of AI. I think when you're trying to convince, the higher ups, for sure, to Praveen's point, top down is always preferred. We need to make a strong business case that the technology is just a tool. But at the end of the day, who does it really benefit? And it has to be, the ROI has to be around that. Technology is, it's like a mouse or a keyboard. You can use it, that's fine. But who does it really help? Productivity gains for store associates is one I can think of, right? Better planning when you're investing into new stores or planograms and experiences for your customer. And number three, unfortunately, safety is a big one. How do I help unlock safety instead of like maybe short-term stopgaps, which is kind of the case we've seen. I'm seeing a Safeway that put barriers at the entrance and one-way exits and one-way entrances. Those are maybe stopgaps, but how do we look at technology as an enabler that with an ROI that keeps on giving, right? It's not I invest once, it can evolve, and people I think can accept those type of investments because they know if there is a new technology, if there's more precision being brought, or there's a more effective things, we can bring them to the same platform and continue the work versus every 5 years I change an entire system.
Agreed.
One thing to add there to resonate, it completely resonates what Wayne is saying, right? Because always the technology decisions need to be like made mindfully, because there is best of breed versus best of suite. Like always people try to struggle with that, because I've seen so many times where they're like retailers go with point solutions, and they have to put a lot of effort stitching them together and integrating them together. So that will stagger the adoption and the scalability, as Wayne was mentioning, as one of the challenges. So thinking more holistically on like, how do you architect a solution that is composable, scalable, and agile enough to incrementally add value to the business?
And I do think that the OpEx model that you all are speaking of, and it's resonating, is the fact that you can pivot when necessary to continue to iterate on your deployment to make sure it's maximizing that output and maximizing that profitability change for your organization. So absolutely, all of that is fantastic information. So let's go back to the audience. Quick poll question. So what is the most important item that you're seeking to solve today? Is it register shrink, self-checkout shrink, aisle shrink, sweethearting, or loitering for your facilities? So speakers, what do you think is going to be the number one response? And Jumbi, you came in first last time, so we're going to ask Praveen to give us his perspective first.
I would say register shrink.
Okay, register shrink.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Wayne or Jumbi?
I'll let Jumbi go.
Yeah, they're kind of connected, register, self-checkout, and sweethearting. But yeah, I'd say register is where all the action is. But self-checkout, at least in terms of solutions, is just a huge and growing area right now. So I'd pick self-checkout.
And
Yeah, those polls questions are getting tougher and tougher to choose from.
And Jumbi is correct. Self-checkout is the #1 response from our audience today, with 40% of our respondents, followed by in-aisle shrink at 26%. And that does relate back to our ORC problem within the retail industry, followed by register shrink and sweethearting. And I do agree, Wayne, that those are tied together very, very closely. It's interesting looking at retail and going out and shopping in brick and mortar stores, how many retailers deployed it and then pulled self-checkout out. And now they're putting self-checkout back in because of the churn and the churn rate that we're seeing with employee retention and needing the ability for customers to check themselves out. So it's just an interesting thing watching the technology ebb and flow with being adopted, removed, and readopted in several different retailers within the industry. So thank you all for your perspectives there. Transitioning with many LP and AP technologies, there are also significant insights to shopper experience and operations. What are some of the recent insights each of you can share in these areas? Praveen, we'll start with you on this question.
Yeah, if we the last couple of years, Microsoft has making a lot of investments, creating industry-specific cloud solutions. So a few of the capabilities that we have released, again, leveraging our platform like cognitive services, is to ensure that we are providing consumer insights on heat mapping, part to purchase, out of stock capability, shrinkage, and other areas, right? So that you can get insights on like online to in-store behavior on what is the buying patterns. And then how do you do planogramming and then promotional optimization within your store to drive sales and customer experience. Along with that, we are trying to integrate these insights into the workflow, like for store operations, so that productivity tools such as whether it's Teams or whether it's frontline worker related solutions, we want to integrate this insight so that it becomes integral to the decision making and the way the store operation is led end to end. And then finally, we have a very strong ecosystem of partners who are building solutions on our capabilities, whether it's around shrinkage, security, loss prevention, tracking, shelf optimization, planogram compliance, etc.
Got it. Jumbi or Wayne, anything to add there?
And Wayne, why don't you go ahead? I have a slightly different take on this. So why don't you go ahead first?
Oh man, I'm gonna have my own take on it for sure. I agree with what Praveen said. Like, it's a really exhaustive list of things that you can do. The simpler way we think about it with our customers, again, really going back to the ROI of any of those type of solutions is, yes, you can solve for the use case right now, but in parallel, you can gather a lot of information. And that information is kind of that extra value, but it's segregated in, I'll just put two buckets, right? One, which is short-term information, which is more operational in nature. And Praveen mentioned a couple of them, like what should I do now? How can I distort resources, et cetera, et cetera. But the longer term is my investments. Every time we know retailers change a planogram, it's a couple millions of dollars across the chain each year per category. So it becomes extremely expensive, or opening new stores, which are heavy investments by themselves. And you want to be able to use this information. I think this information can also be used, and this is the gift that keeps on giving, is once you understand what happens in the store. And with my CPG background, what we refer to it as the moment of truth, when the customer makes a choice and buys one product versus another. And everything comes together at that moment, your journey, the price, et cetera. All this information is amazing to use in stuff that's maybe not loss prevention, but which we say forecasting, supply chain type of topics, because you now have a much better understanding of what's happening in your store. I think also from there, if we tie it back to LP, is once you know the customer journeys, what do they do when they wait in line, right? What do they do when they wait, let's say at the pharmacy? Are they looking at different things? How can I activate a customer and not having him or her wait? Are really interesting topics, but also you could apply this as in-store strategy, right? How do I curb theft? How do I curb ORC, right? Is the layout should be different? Should I place my products in different areas, right? And you can become very, very strategic and tactical about tackling those things with physical answers versus a human capital intensive answer.
Absolutely. So Jumbi, chomping at the bit to hear your perspective now.
No, I was just going to say, actually, with the amazing applications like Pitaya and a sophisticated platform like Microsoft, these days you can get enough technology in stores to basically understand what's happening in brick and mortar stores, as well as you understand, for example, what a customer is doing on your website, right? You collect all the clicks, you collect all the waits, you see what they pick up, see what they buy, etc. But the real question in my mind is what retailers actually do with that data. What actionable intelligence is it really going to yield? And most importantly, who's going to be responsible for acting on that, right? So they need to make sure that the most impactful person for whatever data you're collecting. So for example, if Pitaya gives you an alert for a shelf wipeout, obviously someone in the store needs to act on it. What are they going to do? What does the workflow look like? Or after the fact, you've done a bunch of analysis of, customers going through the store, aisle one, for whatever reason, the flow goes down, right? You can see it on a great heat map. But then what changes are you going to affect in the store, in your employees' behavior? What is it that you're going to do to improve the operations, increase the top line, increase the bottom line, whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so go ahead. Go
Now,
Wayne.
one thing that jumps to mind, I agree 100% with what Jumbi said. And one thing you mentioned about .com, right, is I think when we think, at least from our experiences of the .com experience from a strategy standpoint, from a headquarters standpoint, you have everything: number of clicks, how long, what did you pay attention on, what did you do, what exactly was your journey to the person level, right? And that makes it a very, very powerful tool. And I believe that, with what Microsoft, Nvidia, and ourselves are bringing to stores, you're able to start getting to this level of analytics, which you enjoy on the .com side in store, which is conversion rates, how many people came, didn't buy, thought about something, bounced back. And you can start looking at it through the same omni-channel lens. And that is something that's going to really change what brick and mortar looks like in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Yep. So from your all's perspective, do you feel like your procurement teams that you're interacting with within the retail sector are actually more knowledgeable about solution suites and not so focused on individual single point action items when they're actually seeking to solve business needs?
I would start when we engage with a customer, we usually don't start with a product first mindset. It's more starting from the business and the challenges and the pain points we are trying to solve for, and identifying where the opportunities are to improve processes, like drive optimization or unlock new value to the business. And then once we understand the business requirements well, then coming up with the right solution that can be a combination of our first party or ISV solutions all stitched together, right? And then the other component, like back to Jumbi's point, he made an excellent suggestion that because there is a cultural aspect of driving data and insight first culture, right? So there is a huge change management adoption that needs to be part of the technology implementation as well. So combining all those as part of the consultative sales process and trying to make sure that we are targeting the right buyers, because there is a buying persona, there is a business persona, who will be ultimately using the solution. So making sure that we bring all the parties to the table and delivering the right value to them.
Absolutely. So switching gears a little bit, what all would you make as far as some key recommendations on applying responsible and ethical AI in daily retail operations? And Jimby, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, that's a big one. So I didn't know where to start. Well, two things really come to mind. The first one is, when AI is trained, so for example, I'll use a controversial example of facial recognition, because as much as, people think there are issues with it, I personally think there are a lot of great applications for it. In fact, related to customer service, if you want to get a large number of people in and out of an event, for example, you could use that. But in general, for applications like that, which have issues around identity, you want to make sure that the folks who are providing those applications have trained the AI on the largest possible unbiased data set. And these days, that's possible to do because you can actually generate synthetic data using Nvidia technology. And you can use that synthetic data to then train the AI. So for example, rather than collecting a bunch of real world faces, you can actually create these very realistic faces and vary all the parameters to make sure that as far as possible, or as far as mathematically possible, there's no bias in your training data set. And the second thing I'd add is, every retailer right at the start needs to give some thought to data sovereignty. I think gone are the days where, hey, you have some video lying around on some NVRs in the stores. They may not even have idea who has access to it. These days, right from the start, you got to think what data, where is it going to be stored, who has access to it, how long are you going to keep it, and how are you going to get rid of it. So you got to think that through.
Yeah, so true. Gone are the days where you can just have data for data's sake. If it's not actionable and there's no plan to use the data, then what's the point in having it? You're just taking up space on your network, unfortunately. Wayne or Praveen, your perspectives?
No, I'll let Praveen go first.
I think, completely aligned with Jumbi, right? Because making sure that any use case that you're applying to, right? So there is a proper framework and the principles of responsible AI are put in place. There's enough guardrails on what does PII look like. There's no bias in the training and the retraining of the data, and ensuring that what actions you are taking, depending upon the suggestions and analytical capabilities that your use cases are driving, being transparent, because there is regulations around GDPR, California Consumer Act, so that consent management becomes a big issue, and ensuring that application of the responsible AI there is a centralized governing body within the organization to look at all the use cases and make the right decisions.
Yeah, excellent. Wayne?
Yeah. I mean, Jumbi and Praveen really covered it all. I think, there is another aspect that we do want to take into account is there is frameworks we have to put in place, to your point, Praveen, and that's really like that discipline we need to bring in. And to Jumbi's point, when you train AI is only as good as its training data. So what it learns is what it'll output. So 100% on that, and like synthetic and generative data sets. The other thing that we do here is also that when we process the information, we do it directly on the edge, as in we convert the videos coming in instantly. We don't save anything. And we just take, anonymized data up to the cloud so we can do some extra processing where needed. So that, with that said, your customers' information will stay on site. Of course, there's guardrails that we have to put around that, but we make sure that that we respect that as much as possible.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a lot less data intensive on the network infrastructure as well, which makes it a lot more scalable to retailers that might not have the bandwidth that some of the bigger players in the space have. So one more question for the group. What are some of the impacts of leveraging the technologies we've heard of today? What is this bringing to the table for retail in today's environment? Wayne, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, we with my team and at Centific, we really care about the people on the ground, right? I myself come from 10 years foot on the ground in stores doing retail. And we really believe that, if we want to be effective at solving those problems, it's only as good as how you're going to enable your store associates, right? If you look at even from a financial standpoint, they're probably the biggest P&L line for most retailers. That manpower is key. And to us, it's how do I make it as easy and seamless as possible, right? I don't think we all have the luxury of like day-long trainings, et cetera. It has to be intuitive. It has to be an experience that's very human-centric and that's integrated to, my colleagues were saying, their workflow, right? So if they're using Zebra devices, if they're using phones, color signals, Motorola walkies, et cetera, we have to be able to adapt to those to get them the information so it can be more effective. I think the second aspect is for your store managers, if I'm thinking about very, very big super centers, can manage up a P&L of upwards of $150 million for one store. You want to be very effective with your resources, right? Right now, their resources are multi-skilled. Do the online grocery pickup, do the stock outs, help the customers, go to the cashier, do everything. But if you could find a way of understanding what's happening in your store, you could distort your resources by time, by area, by skill set, so they can be more effective at what they want to do and be more qualitative as well.
Mm-hmm. Praveen and Jumbi, any other feedback on that?
Yeah, all the new technology that's available these days, the two fundamental things they do is one, give you real-time intelligence. And as Wayne said, you're going to empower people to act on that real-time intelligence inside the store to make your, customers want to come back again and again. And the second piece is the ability to really understand, store operations and consumer behavior in a much more detailed and fine-grained way than ever before. But again, you have to be effective at taking that information and then making the necessary changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, yeah, as Wayne said, right, like kind of human-centered design thinking on how do you make store employees, both from a store manager and store associate, life easier. And two is going back to the first point of like, how do we reduce churn, right? Because at the end of the day, like it's a very stressful environment. So how do you provide them the right tools and the capabilities to make their life easier and more productive, and ensuring that like their well-being and safety is of first priority, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even with that high churn for those newer employees, making it easier for them to learn their job with real-time training, that the AI is picking up that they need something in the moment and sending it to their device to help them navigate the conversation with the customer, help them navigate whatever the scenario is with the register, so that they don't necessarily need another employee to actually engage, and they can be successful in doing their job in a much smaller window to get them onboarded and out on the sales floor, I think is ultimately every retailer's goal in today's environment. So fantastic insights from the group. I do want to turn things over to Wayne so that you can all see a little bit about the platform that we're talking about here with Pitaya and what this suite looks like to really help optimize your stores and help optimize your retail organization. So Wayne?
Yeah, let me share it. Can you see the screen?
I sure can.
Okay, perfect. So this is Pitaya actually, and all the data that you're about to see was captured during the launch event at NRF Protect earlier this month in Dallas. So the interface is segregated into different menus, and each menu is here to for different personas. And of course, naturally, as I said, we started with the store associate. So it's an example of a lot of conversations we've had with our customers and how we would materialize a task management system. We all cognizant that different retailers already may or may not have those systems, so we're able to integrate to any type of device or systems that they have. I think the gist of it is when we looked at it with the team is this has to be streamlined. I could train a person in 20 minutes to understand what I have to do. So what we're doing here is being able to filter by, hey, here's my new task. Here's my completed tasks, right? Here's my block task, which happens as well. And be able to give that feedback to either your other associates or your manager so you can move along with your other responsibilities. Then the other thing is to look at different types of tasks, right? There's retail execution, I think we mentioned earlier in the call. There's consumer demand, which is pricing promotion. There's customer experience. How fast am I going to be to attend to a customer? We all had experiences with frustrating experiences where you're trying to buy a TV or a fridge or some very, heavy investment and not having the people to help you, right? Or having to wait. And that is frustrating and you will probably not come back, right? So it impacts loyalty. Loss prevention as well as workplace safety. So what you see here is a very simple list of tasks that a store associate would have, and that they're able to prioritize those tasks by their scoring. So the score can be green, yellow, red. It could be out of 1,000, which is mostly the standard in asset protection, but it could be anything that your teams feel comfortable with. From there, it's a very simple interface. And we found from our research and working with customers that it had to be something that they knew. And if you can see this, you can probably imagine that this kind of looks like your email, right? Where you have your email previews and I get like some information. And when I click on one, I'm able to see the evidence. So evidence is a key point. And that's what all the technologies we talked about bring to the table is you're able to have that evidence, understand exactly what's happening right now and take action, right? So you'd have more details for sure, the scoring, but also you'll have what we say a secondary action, besides saying that you've done or completed your task, which helps the AI. We call that active learning. So we're giving feedback to all the systems to say, that, hey, this was actually not, let's say, customer assistance. It was actually a customer that couldn't find the item, right? And with time, your data will get better. So that's the part of the evolution of the system. Now, if there's out of stock, you would have a picture of a shelf or the side of the shelf, have the evidence, know exactly what to do, right? Was it the case? Was it not the case? And depending on how good your systems are, your cameras are, et cetera, you're able to see those different things, right? So if we think about shrink, so let me look for one shrink occurrence. You'll be able to have the evidence of the person performing this and maybe take action. If you can catch them before, maybe you have third-party security, or maybe you can log in the case with the police, you're able to take action quite quickly, okay? So this is really meant to be easy. And when we thought about user training, we're thinking about, hey, if there were new types of tasks, if there were new types of insights to help you manage your time better, you would just have a different icon, a different evidence, but it will still be the same mechanics for your staff to use. So from a notification standpoint, as soon as this happens, because it's real time, because of the technologies we leverage from Nvidia and Microsoft, because it's in real time, you'll get a notification either in your ear set, in your on your phone, by text, by PA, or by Zebra type devices, and just take action immediately, right? And it's entirely up to the retail ops team to decide what's the process when we have X and Y and Z tasks coming through. Now, from a store manager standpoint, right, what we're trying to get here is to understand the different types of insights that you can. Of course, you have POS sales, right? That goes without saying. That's more of a P&L management, but you can understand how many alerts that you had, high level, right? What was the footfall? What was the in-stock compliance? Like, what if you didn't solve certain things? What would happen? What would be the impact? So we want to be very actionable, right? In general, it's not about just having insight, it's to be able to say and relate to what's at stake. So if there's $465 that impacts my P&L, I need to go take care of it right now, right? You're able to see, when occurrences happen and where it happens. So if you remember, we mentioned earlier in the discussion, distorting resources. And that for a store manager is what he or she can control right now, right then. There's no extra investments. I can tell you who I need at what time of the day and have that better experience. For customer assistance, how long did it take for me to take care of a customer? Can I meet a certain threshold? Can I improve at the day-to-day basis? Self-checkout and would be the same, understanding what types of problems there are. Can I put some training in place? Can I have my team kind of look at those things? And et cetera, for other use cases like loitering. What's the time of the day? What's the area where it's occurring? So,
hey, Wayne, while you're on this
Yep.
screen, I just want to point
Yep.
out that it looks like every single one of these modules within here, or these capabilities, you have indications of dollars saved. So that's also a very, very big thing for retailers considering solutions, because you have real-time data. So if somebody were to leverage this as a proof of concept, you would actually be able to have meaningful data to go to FP&A and say, this is the true return based on the single site. Now let's expand that out and calculate that out to the entire enterprise with a scalable solution on these capabilities. Thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, when we take a look at all of those insights, and as much as possible, we want to tie dollar numbers to it. Precise or not, it has to be directional. It helps you prioritize your task and also understand what improvement you can drive. And I'll say for us as solutioners, being able to show the ROI of those technologies, right? Because those technologies are great, but they're still, there's a question of affordability as well for our customers. So what we want to be able to show is have the data, especially during pilots. Like I say, pilots are more about scale than technology, being able to show the ROI. See, if I tell you that register shrink, we misscans at the beginning were 10% of the transaction, and you drop it down to 5%, that's great from a percentage standpoint. But what does it mean in dollars? And being able to translate and extrapolate that is key. Now, of course, you can put a dollar number on loyalty as well, but that would necessitate a little bit more discussions with the team to understand what the lifetime value of a customer is, and frequency of trips, et cetera. But you can make solid assumptions and bake this in, so your store manager can be very, very effective at running his P&L.
No, that's fantastic. Great information, great dashboard.
Yeah, I mean, it's also very customizable. So it was when we work with our teams and customers, it's about striking the balance with extreme customization, which is what you would see in tabular type of analytics, and having stuff that's a little bit too simplistic as well. So in this case, you have you're able to customize this dashboard, move things around. They're all modules, make them smaller or bigger, kind of like widgets. But also be able to see certain information quickly. Okay.
Got it.
So I'll pause the demo here, but happy to get another call with the people if needed to discuss this more.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a couple of minutes for some live Q&A. So first question that we have coming in the pipe is, can you tell us a little bit more about Pitaya and the retail operations software as a service platform that you've launched, and how we can set up a proof of concept with your organization?
Sure. So back I was mentioning, so back in June, early June, we launched this platform called Pitaya, right? And it's this one-stop shop for your retail operations. So what was important to us was to say, hey, you have multiple use cases outside the store, front of the store, which is your register lanes, welcoming of your customer, middle of the store, which is your aisles and all the interactions going on with your customers, and back of the store, the warehouse, et cetera. And if you look at the number of use cases, even statistically, there's probably over 20 or 30. And that would mean in classic retail that you have to handle 20-point solutions. So where we came from with Pitaya was to say, look, we have technology that's able to make it work. We want that ease of use for our retailers to onboard them. So multiple solutions into one, and the evolution of the platform, let's say we've solved all the shrink, and there's other things in value we want to drive, you'll be able to do it in one-stop shop fashion. The second part was, we want to be mindful of the existing CapEx investments that have been made. Can I make the cameras a little bit smarter? Can I leverage certain things and technologies, sometimes RFIDs, et cetera, that's already been put in place and get more return from it as possible. So from a pilot standpoint, we do a couple of things. And Praveen was mentioning consultative services. So it's very important that we're an end-to-end partner, right? We do the consultative part, the solving, but also the servicing later on. So what we do typically in our pilots, right, they last between 6 and 12 weeks, is we're trying to target 2 or 3 stores, which are varied in their kind of profile, but and gather the information. What's the ROI? We're building a business case for scale. That is the point of a pilot. So prove out the technology for sure. That goes without saying. But what information can I gather to make the business case for scaling? I'm pretty sure everybody on this call knows what the problem is, but you need the data to back it up. That's number one. So number one, prove the technology. Number two, build a business case, show the ROI realization and the strategies for scaling. So that's kind of how we go about a pilot, being very hand in hand with our asset protection colleagues to help them convince of the value of those types of solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wayne. So we have time for one quick question. So Jumbi and Praveen, if you could give the audience some advice today in how to approach this scenario in layering on optimization technology, what would you say? Jumbi, we'll go to you first.
Sure. I would say, make sure you pick application providers, like Pitaya, that give you the flexibility of running anywhere from the edge to the cloud, and platforms like, Microsoft that, again, can give you complete flexibility in deploying whatever application you need, wherever you need to deploy it.
Okay. Praveen?
Yeah, building on that thought, again, start from the business use case and the problem statement and what value that you're driving, and then make sure that you're architecting it for scale so that you have the right components and you're making the right decision on the platforms and the technologies.
Awesome. Well, great webinar, great information. Really thrilled to have you all on as panelists. We do have a couple of announcements for our audience. If you're looking to get certified in loss prevention, Pitaya is sponsoring a 20% discount off of LPF memberships and our certification courses. 5 random attendees will receive an LP certification course scholarship courtesy of Pitaya. So be on the lookout for our post-webinar email blast you'll receive tomorrow. As always, thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and have a great rest of your week. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.